The left's interference in our elections have never been more brazen. It's obvious to anybody who still has their wits about them that they're trying to rob the American people of the ability to even choose an alternative to Joe Biden and the regime that put him in power. But this feels like a dangerous moment right now for America, doesn't it? I feel an incredible sense of urgency for all of us with whatever our station is in life to tell the truth about what's going on right now, because there may come a time when we're not able to. Don't you think? The threats to free speech seem pretty real. We definitely have seen a lot of people shut down, arrested, imprisoned, forced out of the public conversation by the left. They have a by any means necessary approach to power, and nobody has studied this really better or is more eloquently able to share it than my next guest. Dr. Victor Davis Hanson joins us now. He's a senior fellow at the Hoover Institute and the author of The Dying Citizen: How Progressive Elites, Tribalism, and Globalization Are Destroying the Idea of America. Dr. Victor Davis Hanson, thank you, sir, for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Do you feel that there's an urgency right now? Like this may be the last big opportunity for us to discuss this in the open.
Yeah, I think everybody does, because there's certain precedents that have been set insidiously the last 4 or 5 years. We've never impeached a president twice in his first term or ever. We've never tried a president as a private citizen in an impeachment trial in the Senate. We've never really raided and forced a president's home with what was usually a bureaucratic dispute about classification of presidential papers. We've not, since Lincoln was removed from the ballot by 10 successionist states, have we ever removed a president's name, especially one that was the leading contender, from the ballot. So these are all new frontiers that we've entered. And this is besides the $40 million, 22-month Russian collusion hoax that we never got an apology about, the Russian disinformation laptop, the Alpha Bank ping. So there's been a whole series of things that are taking us down a particular trajectory where we don't really know where it's leading, but almost every day there's a revelation that is just antithetical to the American experience, whether it's the FBI hiring the old Twitter to spy and suppress news on political opponents, or FBI directors who systematically lie under oath without consequences. So it's
yes,
something to be really worried about.
So what do you get out of this decision this week by the left to remove Trump from a ballot in Colorado? Is this panic on their part that they're losing control? Or is it swagger that they've realized that they can be completely brazen about their exercise of power?
I think it's a mixture of both. There's certainly, this is part of the Trump dictator meme that he's going to do all the things that they would do if they were in his position and he had suffered from them. If they had suffered what he has from them and then they return to power, I know what they would do, so they project that fear onto him. But I think it's also a lack of deterrence. I think they just feel that because of their assumed moral superiority, that they can, any end that they declare as superior morally, intellectual, than any means justified or okay to
yes.
attain them. And they don't think the right is ever going to, anytime the right even talks about impeachment, they go berserk, even though they impeached Trump twice. Anytime the right says maybe we should subpoena a presidential son, they go crazy, even though they did it with Ivanka and Jared and the Trump boys in various lawsuits at January 6th. Anytime you talk about a whistleblower, suddenly they're the nefarious characters in the IRS, where before we were told that the whistleblower, Eric Ciaramella and Vindman, were iconic. So they just don't believe that anything can be reciprocated, because
right.
They know that if we were to do the same thing they were doing, the country would descend into a spiral of chaos and destruction. And that makes kind of the Republicans, they have to play the adult, and the left plays the irresponsible adolescent, with the idea that the adult would never do what the adolescent is doing.
Right. The kid keeps hitting the parent, but the parent would never strike back because of the strength difference. But
Yeah.
But it does seem to me that, like, that they have Republicans mostly billed correctly, though, because they decided this week to remove Trump from the ballot in Colorado, although it was suggested by a couple of people. I think Dan Patrick, the lieutenant governor of Texas, said this. Republicans, I can't even imagine them removing Biden on the basis of an accusation in any state, as much as I am hearing some people this week say, hey, turnabout is fair play.
Yeah, they just, you can imagine doing that. They would go crazy if you even suggested. And there's a lot of grounds, according to their logic, to do so, because when you read that Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, the last clause is, if you aid or abet enemies of the United States, well, there's no greater enemy of the United States than the Mexican cartels. And when you open the border and deliberately violate your oath to enforce the laws as they're written, and you destroy federal immigration statutes, and you let 8 million people come in, and we know they're making billions of dollars, the cartels, and it just invites, say, a Texas or an Arizona governor to say, you know what, we're going to, under the 14th Amendment, we're going to try to get Biden's name off the ballot. Or Kamala Harris in 2020, when she, right in the height of, billions of dollars of damage, 1,500 police officers injured, 35 dead, courthouse torch, precinct, rushed the White House grounds in an attempt to get to Trump. And she says this isn't going to stop, nor should it stop. And it won't stop. And it will go on past the election. So there's all sorts of cases of people on the left advocating violence. Chuck Schumer out in front of the Supreme Court warning the justices, Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, that they're not going to know what hit them.
Yes.
And they're going to reap the whirlwind. And election denialism. Barbara Boxer in 2004 tried to stop the election by delaying the Ohio count. 2016, we had all of those celebrities trying to create faithless electors to renounce their duty to honor the popular vote in their states. We had Hillary Clinton say that the election was illegitimate. We had Stacey Abrams campaigning for 2 years that she was a real governor. All of these things that they're using to indict or build a case against Trump, they have done repeatedly, but they just assume that no one would be so brazen to criminalize that political difference or debate or back and forth.
And they've whipped their supporters into such a frenzy that many of those supporters have actually attacked Republicans in some vile ways, including a Bernie Sanders campaign volunteer who opened fire on a field of Republican congressmen, grievously wounding them, specifically Steve Scalise. You watched as members of Congress were being attacked in the streets of D.C. Rand Paul's now been attacked, and his wife, attacked multiple times by left-wing lunatics. And there's been no lasting conversation about that. There were no panels put together by Congress, no national conversation, no how do we stop this, how do we bring the temperature down. Instead, all of that is treated as something normal.
It is. I can remember for weeks people talked about this buffoonish group of people who did riot, but it wasn't an insurrection, but they said desecrated the solemnity of the Capitol chambers by going in and sitting with their feet on the desk, but they didn't commit passive anal sex, excuse the term, right in the Senate chambers, and then pass that off as being victimized while they circulated pornographic, a Senate aide.
Yes.
So it's just so different. You would think that everybody would be outraged and would immediately indict that person for illegally being in a Senate chamber and peddling a pornographic film out of that violation, but they didn't. And I think finally I think they understand now that they've gone way overboard, and it's almost like a gunfight, and they've shot a gun and missed, and they're just staring and thinking, what is going to happen after what we've done? We know what we've done, and we know we deserve it, but we don't think they'll actually reply in kind.
It does feel like we're being tested, though. It's like that. A lot of this is like, how far can we take this? And it seems like it's actually pretty far. I mean, if they're removing the candidate from the ballot, there's not I'm not seeing protests at the state house in Colorado or the Supreme Court. I'm not, like, people aren't taking to the streets over this. They're like, well, hopefully the court system works it out. You have people who are having sex with one another on top of Amy Klobuchar's desk instead of the side of the Senate hearing room. Video gets released, and people are like, oh, that's a weird scandal. Like, it's like, it almost feels like, I don't know. We talk a lot about indicting our leaders and what they're doing to our country, and they deserve every bit of it. But I do get worried about the kind of sort of, the blasé response we get from the American public to it.
I think they're just, I don't think people realize that they're almost immune because we're having things happen that's almost civilization versus nihilism. They've never seen anything like the border. 8 million people. They don't understand when they see the eclipse of it. They think, why is this happening? Who's doing this? We have laws. I couldn't do this. I have to have a real ID and get on a plane. They're putting thousands of illegal aliens on planes without the ID they require me to have. And they look at smash and grab and carjackings, and everything's locked up in a drugstore, homeless defecation, urination, fornication, right in its common sight. And they think to themselves, what is happening? And they kind of retreat into a monastery of the mind. They just say, I can't deal with this anymore. I just got to concentrate on what I have control over.
Yes.
And that's why they're dropping out. They're moving from blue states to rural states to conservative states. They tune out the Oscars, the Emmys. They don't even have any idea what the latest movie is. They don't watch the NBA. They don't watch Major League Baseball as much, or even the NFL. They're just kind of dropping out of the popular culture and just tending to their own garden, so to speak. And that's not going to work if you just say, you know what, I can't deal with these people. I just want to keep away from them.
Yeah, well, it's a good thing the government keeps legalizing weed for everybody, so they have somewhere to go and hide. It's like crazy.
Yeah, I mean, but they don't want to let people do that. They want to get in your face. They want to cause a confrontation. They want to find out where you are.
Yeah,
they just, and you can see it with the trans movement. It wasn't just enough to have trans people protected civilly. They just have to get in your face and say, we're going to destroy female sports as we knew it by putting biological males. And what are you going to do about it?
Yeah, well, this is also irrecognizable.
I'm sorry. Your daughter's going to be in a locker room with a man with testicles and a phallus, and what are you going to do about it? And
right, exactly.
I don't know. It's almost like a revolutionary. It reminds me so much of the 19th century anarchist movement, where people did that in Europe, where they tried to blow up stuff and destroy statues and just topple governments by the sheer barbarity or crudity of just nihilism. And this left has become nihilist, whether it's the border or crime or energy. They just want to shut things down and destroy it.
What was the goal of that anarchist movement? What were people pursuing by causing that chaos?
They were trying to show that they were trying to reveal the impotence of government, and that the establishment could not stop people setting off bombs or assassinating people or mobbing institutions or toppling statues or vandalizing things. The idea was, and we saw it in the 60s when I was a student, there was a lot of anarchy. And the idea, I can remember being at UC Santa Cruz and protesters, right? They went out and they let all the cows out of the university pasture just so the cows would go through the streets. And what are you going to do about it? And that shows you what we think of your rules about safety and farming. It was just an assault on the senses. I can remember being in a class where professors would come in and say, if you want to pass wind, or if you don't want to wear socks, or you can do whatever you want in our class. But it was a revolt against culture, civilization, norms. And in that process, you discredit them,
yes.
And then a new paradigm comes in. And we know what the new paradigm is. It's the DEI woke, equality of result, anti-meritocratic system. And they've been very successful at it. They really have. They've changed the whole world of universities, admissions. You saw those 3 college professors. They just flat out said, basically, we don't have a problem with somebody who calls for the destruction of the Jewish people or Israel. And they knew when they were looking at us that they were lying, that if you just substitute black or Latino or trans or gay, and you would be expelled in 2 seconds for saying something like that.
Yeah, for sure. And that makes a lot of sense. In other words, if your life is personally disordered, you begin to become convinced you don't want anyone else to have the comfort of order. And the left is...
That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to say, you don't want to meet us on climate change. You're not going to be able to buy a gas oven. How do you like that?
Yes.
You think that you're going to be protected in your little white Christian male heterosexual enclave. Well, we're going to have 8 million people cross the border, and you see how you like it. Or we're going to have a carjacker in your neighborhood, or smash and grab, and he'll be out the same day that he assaults you. What do you think of that? Or it's kind of this critical theory. It's the only reason that you have laws against stealing Adidas is because you don't have to steal Adidas. So you hurt people by passing laws that they can't steal Adidas, and therefore they have a right to steal them because it's an arbitrary construct. Yes. It's very sick what they're doing, but it's nihilistic.
All right, last question for you, and I'm always so grateful for your time, Victor Davis Hanson. Yeah. Predicting forward, I think right now a lot of conservatives are saying, okay, maybe we can win in the Supreme Court, get Trump's name back on the ballot, and stop this nonsense. But my sense is that the left isn't just going to stop with this, that things are only going to escalate if they don't have their way. When legitimate means fail them, they turn to force and violence. Isn't that the case?
Yeah, I think they have a great confidence of Molly Ball's Time essay that just reviewed the 2020 election. They have great confidence that they have the money to absorb the work of registrars, drop boxes, mail-in voting, early voting with very little percentage of rejected ballots, just what they did in 2020. So I think they still feel that they can get their agenda through, even though it doesn't have popular support, and their candidates through by their influence, the control of institutions, the media, academia, corporate boardroom, and the sheer amount of money at their globalized disposal. And, Silicon Valley, the billionaire class. So I think they're very confident that they don't really care. They don't really worry that all of their issues or that Joe Biden is really unpopular. They think they have other means to achieve their goals, and it may be violent. And we saw that in May. There was no consequences. 14,000 people were arrested, and almost none of them were convicted, much less served time in May, June, July, August of 2020 when they tried to destroy the country in these major city riots.
Well, Dr. Victor Davis Hanson, I'm genuinely appreciative of your time today, as always. Please have an excellent Christmas, and we can't wait to talk to you again soon, sir. Thank you very much.